Hi everyone, I'm Jeanie from Kaleidoscope Collections, and I don't know if you know this about me, but I love working with fabric just as much as I love working with paper. And I've created this awesome card that combines my two loves. So let's take a closer look at this card. It's actually printed on fabric. You may not be able to see it, and actually most people can't when they first look at it, but when you feel it, it's a very cool effect. Now you know with me, everything starts with the computer. So let's go get that and see what we're going to do to make this card. I actually started with this photo that I took. Now, I know it looks a little abstract, but I made it specifically to create kaleidoscopes. Now I already have Kaleidoscope Kreator open on the computer, and I have the photo open in Kaleidoscope Kreator. If you click and drag outside the boundary of the photo, you can rotate. If you click and drag on the photo itself, you can move it around. And if you click and drag on the corners, you can resize. You see here a circle, but you may have noticed that in the card, it was actually a square. To change that, we go to the template selector, and you'll see that there's a ton of templates to choose from. Let's choose the square kaleidoscope. And you'll see that the shape has changed here in the workspace, and up in the thumbnail preview, you now see a square kaleidoscope. Now, one thing that you may not know is that you can actually save the workspace in Kaleidoscope Kreator. What that means is that you can save the photo, the template shape, and most importantly, the position of the photo in the template. And I did that for this particular card because I really loved the kaleidoscope that I created for it. So in order to open that back up, I simply go to File, Open Workspace, and double-click on the saved workspace. And now it's opened up with all my settings intact. And in fact, if you'd like to see the full screen version of that kaleidoscope, you just click on the preview button, and there it is. This is a kaleidoscope that we're going to be working with. Now we need to print it. But before we print it, we are going to change the background color. We want a 1/2 inch margin around the kaleidoscope when it prints. So to do that, we click on the color picker, pick a dark pink color, and now we print. We go to File, Print Kaleidoscope. The size of the kaleidoscope is going to be 4 inches. We want a 1/2 inch print margin, and make sure you uncheck Center Kaleidoscope on Page because that's going to be the most efficient way to print it. And then click OK. And now in the print dialog, we're going to set the printer to print on fabric. Yes, we're printing on fabric. There's a special fabric that is made specifically for inkjet printers. It's specially treated so that it holds the inkjet dyes even if it gets wet, and it's paper back, so it's stiff enough to go through the printer. You put it through the printer so that you'll be printing on the fabric side, just like you do regular photo paper. And just in case you're wondering, because I know a lot of people do, you don't use any more ink than you would printing on regular photo paper. Okay, so this is what I just pulled off my printer. Now you may notice there's actually 2 kaleidoscopes on here that are completely different. That's because I had already printed one kaleidoscope. I put the fabric back through the printer in the opposite direction and printed the kaleidoscope that we're using for our project today. It's just a more efficient use of the fabric. Now we're going to peel the fabric off of the paper. Now I have a trick here. You can start on a corner, but you actually want to peel straight on the grain of the fabric, because if you peel from the corner, you'll stretch it out, and then you won't have a square anymore, and it'll be difficult to get back into the square. Now this fabric is pure cotton. It's 100% cotton, and now we're just going to cut out around the edge of the printed margin. So here's a kaleidoscope cut out. We're going to flip it over and apply a very small amount of glue stick to the back, just a small X. If it's too heavy, it's going to be difficult to stitch through the fabric. We're going to take 2 pieces of batting. This is mostly used by quilters, and everything you need to create this card is included in the Gilded Kaleidoscope kit from Kaleidoscope Collections. 2 sheets of the inkjet fabric, batting, backing, metallic thread, regular thread, a needle, and crystals. So I'll have everything you need, but for right now we have 2 squares of batting. 3 3/4 inches are going right in the center of your kaleidoscope fabric. And then we're going to take a piece of muslin and again put a little bit of glue stick on there, flip it over, and put that right on top. Okay, now we have a sandwich. We're going to flip it over, lift up one edge of the Kaleidoscope fabric. And again, light glue stick just along the edge. I'm going to take the top fabric and just kind of tuck it in a little bit. You actually want to be able to see the raised edge of the batting. Okay, I've got all 4 sides glued down, and now we're going to start with some sewing. This is really easy to do. I've already threaded a needle, and I'm using some dark blue thread, not because it matches, but because you'll be able to see it a little bit better. But you'll want to use matching thread. I come up from behind, right on the edge of the kaleidoscope, the printed kaleidoscope, and pull that through. I do have a knot there. And then we're just going to do a running stitch. This is the easiest stitch ever. If you go down and just rock your needle, come up, and you're going right along the edge of the printed kaleidoscope, down and up and down and up. And then when you can't fit any more on the needle, just pull it through. And you're going to do that all the way around and then secure it on the back. And when you're done, it'll look like this on the back. So the only other thing I like to do before I start the fun stuff is to put a small tack in the center. That just secures everything so it doesn't move around too much. So just a short piece of thread, come up right in the center, and then I don't even have a knot in there. Just go down maybe 1/8 of an inch away, maybe less, pull it through, and then you'll just tie a square knot on the back. So I've just finished off the back with a knot, and now everything's secure and we get to start the fun stuff. First thing we need to do before we actually start stitching is figure out where we're going to stitch. So to do that, I actually printed out a second kaleidoscope on regular paper just in draft mode so that I could look at it and actually draw the lines that I want to stitch. You could do the same thing if you had a transparency and wanted to put it over the fabric. You could do it that way too. I just find it a little bit easier on the paper. And I'm seeing some very distinct lines going like this, so I'm going to say, okay, that's going to be my first stitch line. And when you draw these lines, they do not need to be perfect. This is just a guide for you so that when you start actually stitching on the fabric, you have an idea of where you want to stitch. But I'm also seeing some strong lines around here that look like a flower, and I think this would look really nice stitched out. So I'm going to draw all the way around here, and then I would draw all that. I also think these outside lines would just really help finish the whole design. Okay, we figured out where we want to stitch. Now it's time to start stitching. Now, you will be stitching on fabric, but I'm actually going to stitch on an enlarged piece of paper, just so you can see the actual stitches. When you stitch on the fabric, the stitch length will be between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch, and that's pretty small, so we're going to work on a larger scale first. Now, we're going to be doing a back stitch, and I know you've seen this before on previous episodes. I've already poked holes in this paper. Now, the cool thing about fabric is you don't have to spend time poking any holes. You just start sewing. But for paper, I needed to do that. And I'm going to come up from the back and then down through the next hole. There's one stitch. Come up on the next stitch from the back. And then this is where the back comes in, part of back stitch. You go back to the hole that you had come out of previously. Go down and then go ahead to the next empty hole. And you come up and back down. And you just continue along the line that you want to stitch. Now for the actual card, I used metallic thread. And I really like this because it's really glitzy and adds a lot to the card. But I stitched it out in a dark blue thread so that you could see the back and what it would look like on the back. But here's the fun part. Once you look at the front with the metallic thread, look at how much it brings out that whole design. Now the next thing we're going to do is actually create the card. But before we do that, we need to cut the edges about 1/4 of an inch. Okay, we've got all the excess fabric cut away, and now it's time to add a mat around the kaleidoscope. You'll notice that this is a double mat of cardstock. Now I've put tape around the inside hole here. I like to use a red liner tape because it's really tacky and just really holds the fabric really well. You just put it around top, and you actually want it to pop out. You want that dimension. And after you've got it secure, you'll want to add it to the front of your card. Now I'm going to show you a trick for this. You'll see that I have red liner tape around the outside edge as well. I'm going to remove just one of those sides. That's going to become my top. I'm going to bring in a folded piece of cardstock, line up the bottoms, kind of tap the edges, and then just tack across the top. So the only other thing you need to do is pull off the red liner tape and secure it down. And we're almost done with the card. The only other thing we have to add is some crystals. I've got some hot fix crystals that just really add dimension, sparkle, just wonderful addition to the cards. Now you'll notice that I've got a special tool here. This is the hot fix applicator that makes it easy to apply the hot fix crystals. So this tool has a special nib. It is sized to correspond to the size of crystals that we're using, and it's very, very hot. So I'm going to actually just press down on a crystal. It picks it up. As I pick it up, it's heating up that glue, and then I can just come over here and place it where I want it on the card. So we're just going to keep adding crystals to the card until we think it's done. And here we have the final card. Isn't it just beautiful with the crystals and the metallic thread? It just glistens. Now, I know you might be thinking that this is an awful lot of work for one card, but really the entire process is extremely therapeutic. And with this technique, you can take any photo and create a beautiful work of art. For example, with this photo here, these 3 buttons created this beautiful card. You can frame your cards. You can even create kaleidoscopes out of the focus photos on your scrapbook pages. So get out a needle and thread and have some fun. I'll see you next time.
For step-by-step instructions on how to create this week's project, download the design guide featuring special make-it-your-own bonus tips.